24 minutes before 10 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. I wish everybody would realize, and it's amazing to me that everybody does not realize, the contribution that our young men and women make when they decide to join the armed forces.
Yes.
When you are putting yourself into a place where there's a possibility that you could lose your life as a result of serving in one way or another, you are greater than me. You are greater than anything I've ever done. We have people in our community who have served in probably every conflict, every war that's out there. I have a nephew who served in Afghanistan. My father, who has passed away, was a World War II vet. My brother served for 20 years in the Air Force. Everybody who is a veteran, thank you for your service. And I'm not just doing lip service. I promise you, there's a deep, deep part of my heart that realizes that without you, I couldn't do this. And speak freely while doing this. So with that said, let me say this, that when my nephew Christopher went to Afghanistan, of course, prayers were that he would come back safe. There are some people who come back safe, but they still have been changed by that experience. We have a young veteran who used to come in here during the Veteran Show on Thursdays. His name is Steve.
Yes.
And Steve was in a vehicle that ran over an improvised explosive device. Is that what they call it?
Yes.
Did I say it right? And he has forever been changed by that. Fortunately for him, he is such a good person and such a kind spirit, and oh my gosh, just a wonderful guy. But I can imagine it not happening that way. I can imagine somebody coming back from serving, whether they were exposed to an explosive or maybe witnessed something and have post-traumatic stress disorder, and I can imagine that veteran, male or female, being changed forever and not necessarily being a fun person to be around. And how tragic is it if that person has children, especially if those children remember dad or mom from before their time in the service or before they were injured anyway. That is exactly what we're going to talk about right now. Dr. Jerid Fisher has a book to tell you about that is really outstanding. It is written as if it's a children's book, so the children will benefit from the message in it. It's called My Dad Got Hurt, What Can I Do? Helping Military Children Cope with a Brain-Injured Parent. It tells it tells a story that makes you want to cry, actually.
Yeah.
It's wonderfully illustrated, by the way. Dr. Fisher is a board-certified forensic neuropsychologist. He's the chairman of the National Academy of Neuropsychology Foundation. He's an educator of the children of our wounded warrior families. He's a clinical associate professor of psychiatry at the University of Rochester Medical Center. And it's an honor to be able to have him on our show and to talk about this book called My Dad Got Hurt, What Can I Do? Dr. Fisher, thank you so much for what you're doing and for taking time to be with us this morning.
Well, Larry, first of all, thank you so much, and I appreciate that wonderful introduction. I echo your sentiments completely, and in fact, it's the very feelings that you expressed in your gratitude to our wounded warriors and our service people that motivated me as the chairman of the foundation that's really interested in promoting knowledge about the brain and brain injury. That's what brought me to helping write this book and get it out there. We're giving this book away free to the military for any service member who's sustained a brain injury in their service for our country. So we're very excited to have the opportunity to be on your show to talk about it.
Very good. Well, thank you for doing that. So I want to get the information, and then we'll ask you again at the end. How do they get the book?
Well, the way that they can get the book is, for instance, we've reached out to Blue Star families. We've given a bunch of copies to them so they could contact Blue Star families, or they can actually go to our foundation website and send us a note that they want copies, and we will get them to them. Our foundation website, if you'd like, I can give you those that email address or that address if you'd like.
Yes, please. Yes.
It's the, I'm going to give you the initials. It's NAN, which stands for the National Academy of Neuropsychology. So it's nanfoundation.org, O-R-G.
Okay. Did you write this?
I wrote it with in fact, the author that I essentially edited it with a service member's wife who has 2 children. She lives in North Dakota. And her name is Brunella. She's on the front cover of the book. And she, I thought, was the perfect person to basically help write the narrative because she's lived this. She lives it every day.
Is this her story?
This is not her story, but it's a story we created that kind of reflects stories that she's heard and that I've heard because I've done a lot of work with the military.
Okay.
But it could be almost anyone's story, as you know, who goes off to combat and gets a brain injury, as you said, from an improvised explosive device or through a bullet wound. Many ways that people get brain injuries, unfortunately.
The hardest question that I'm guessing there is to answer in this circumstance is when a child understands what happened and asks, is Dad ever going to be back to normal?
Or mom.
Larry, that's exact. Or mom, yes, either one. And I want to say that that's really what motivated us to write the book, because we thought, what about a child who's 8 or 9 years old, sees mom or dad go off to war in one personality, one state of mind, and comes home different? And it's so easy for the child to think it's their fault, that they didn't do something right, because they often get overlooked in this whole process. So that's why we wrote the book targeting them. So in the story, it could serve as a way of opening up a conversation for the parents to talk with the child about why is dad or mom different.
Yeah. I can imagine this creates some real bad times. I wouldn't be surprised, I guess, if a child ends up hating his parent because maybe the parent comes back and is just so bad that they just never, and they grow up and they never forgive him. But eventually, I think the book is going to do so much good in explaining what's going on. How long has the book been out? Have you had any feedback yet, either from parents or from children?
Well, the book has just been out like 2 or 3 weeks. We just put up a Facebook page. We've already got 1,000 people following us on Facebook. We've gotten, we're working up to our reviews on Amazon. We have all 5-star reviews.
I see that.
So far the feedback's been great. But again, Larry, I think you're absolutely right. We've got to get the word out. We need to let people know this book is a resource and it's out there and it's going to help people.
But the dad in the story just doesn't snap at the children and the mom. He also snaps at people outside of the family.
Absolutely. And, let me say this. When you have a brain injury, and again, each brain injury is different, but many brain injuries cause changes in personality where a person may become more irritable, may have attacks of rage, but essentially their personalities can change. They can also become very depressed. And for someone who's an outsider or even a family member, it's like, why is this person different?
Don't know.
What happened?
You don't really know. You are a neuropsychologist, so I have a question for you based on what I'm sure you know. If it's a brain injury, like a physical injury, that's one thing. What about the person who witnesses a killing or horrible explosion where he himself or she herself is not physically affected by what she or he witnesses, but rather is internally, emotionally changed by that? Is that even harder to work with?
Well, I think, great question, Larry. And you're talking about essentially what people call post-traumatic stress disorder or stress reaction. That often, by the way, you can see that sometimes in conjunction with a brain injury, so you can have both, which really makes things complicated. But every person is different. Some people deal with stress, where they compartmentalize and they can move on past it. Other people can't. And seeing something horrendous like you described can be a life-changing event. And without the proper treatment and without the proper support, that can have very detrimental effects long term on a person's personality and the way that they behave as a parent towards their children and their spouse.
Wow. This is probably a hard question to answer, but is there anything that a service person can do before entering a war area to prepare for this, so that if this happens to them, they come out a little bit less scathed? Or is it just inevitable? Is it as inevitable as possibly losing a limb?
I wish let's do this and this is going to help you. But there really isn't any. There really isn't a way to prepare a person for this. I mean, other than to educate them. But brain injuries occur at the least expected times. Yeah. And there's nothing you can do about that other than to hope that when you come home that you have the proper treatment, that you have the proper rehabilitation. And again, brain injury doesn't just affect one person, it affects the entire family.
But when the military person comes home, does he have to want to get the help? We've heard stories that sometimes they feel there's nothing wrong and then they'll commit suicide.
Great question. And indeed, very often people that have injuries either don't understand the full extent of their own injuries or don't want to acknowledge that they have them. And you're absolutely right. So it's critical that we offer them services to help them become aware of the limitations that they have and how they're affecting other people. But totally correct. I just saw a man the other day who had a very severe brain injury in a civilian accident. Terrible story. And he wanted so much to be who he was before this accident that he was unwilling to acknowledge to me the very significant limitations that he had. And I can understand that. I mean, I can appreciate why, but at the same time, he's not getting the kind of help he needs because he's not willing to acknowledge these very significant problems that have developed because his brain is damaged.
Can it ever get better?
Well, it depends on how severe the injury is. Everybody can make progress towards some improvement or learning ways to compensate. There are medications that can help people with behavior problems. I never want to take away hope. I mean, I think to believe that you'll have a complete recovery after severe brain injury is probably misleading. But at the same time, I always want to encourage people to believe that if they work hard and they get the proper treatment, they can certainly make progress towards making their life a lot better than it was if they didn't get that treatment.
If a woman or a man who is experiencing this and they come home, are they going to recover better if they have a loving family around them as opposed to they're single and the other family members don't really want to admit it and they don't care to help?
That's a great question. You know, it takes me back to earlier in my career. I developed brain injury centers around the state of New York where I lived. And the reason I did that is because we were sending people out of state at that time to get rehabilitated for brain injuries. And so I felt that the real equation and the important ingredient for getting better was to be close to your family. And so we built brain injury centers in our cities where people could stay at home and have the support and love of their family all the way through the rehabilitation process. And so I can't echo enough what you just said. Family is an important part of the healing process and the process of getting better.
You have a hard job. Our job is pretty easy. Our job is to get the word out about what you're doing in this half hour. And what you're doing is you're giving people information that might help with their family relationships, especially for their children. The book that we're talking about is a book that looks like it's written for children, and it's fair to say it is written for children. It's called My Dad Got Hurt, What Can I Do? Helping Military Children Cope with a Brain-Injured Parent. Our guest is Dr. Jerid Fisher, and he told us there's a way to get it for free, and I'm going to ask him to repeat that. But I want to tell you something. The owner of this radio station, one of the owners, is the vice president of a local group called Vets Helping Vets. And they have a Veterans Resource Center. And so normally when we get a book like this, I give it away to a member of the audience. But I think I'm going to give this to the owner of the station and have him bring it down there. Maybe just sit it on a coffee table. Who knows? Somebody might come in and see it. And it just may help somebody over there, you know?
And he also is
a
veteran. So Joe's
he's a veteran.
No, that's great. And I was going to say to both of you, if he would like more copies, I can send him 25 copies or 50 copies. I mean, we want this book to be available. So if you know of an organization like the owners' organization, which sounds like a fabulous group, let us know. Give me a phone call. Let me know. I'll send books right out.
All right,
we want them out there.
All right, hang on with us after we get off the air in about 9 minutes, and Robin will get that information. Okay.
Very good. Yes, thanks.
So, but for the listeners, so now we know that some copies will be at the Veterans Resource Center as soon as we get them from Dr. Fisher. But if somebody wanted it sent to themselves, you said there's a way to do that?
Yes, there's a couple of things they can do. Of course, for the veterans, we want them to get them for free. For those who aren't vets, we want them to buy the book on Amazon or Lulu, LULU.com, because their buying a book is going to allow us to pay for a book to buy for a veteran.
I love that.
For a veteran, yeah. So we want people to buy the book, obviously, so that we can underwrite that cost. But for veterans, if they reach out to us through our website, which again is nanfoundation.org, just send us a note. We will respond to that. They can also reach out to Blue Star Families, who we just sent a bunch of copies to. But there should be no excuse for a person not to get this book. So if they want to go to my website and write me a letter and say, please send me a book, I'd be happy to do that. And my website, of course, is just my name, Jerid, Jerid Fisher, FISHER.com.
Okay. And if you're looking at the video streaming that we're doing right now of this interview, that cover you're seeing on the video feed is the cover of the book.
That's great.
When you are helping these veterans with the traumatic brain injuries one-on-one, do you also speak with the family members to give them hope that their loved one is going to return to be the person they once were?
Well, I think it's important, again, depending on each individual having, each injury has to be analyzed for what it means. Sometimes, in fact, more times than not, if you've had a significant brain injury, you probably are not going to be the person you were. You're going to be somebody else who's equally lovable and a good person. But it's sometimes important to adjust expectations about what's going to happen. Again, family is critical. If you have a family involved in supporting the person who has the injury, you're going to have a better outcome long term. So absolutely, you want the family involved. And that's why we wanted to write this book, to reach out to the children of the family, because we feel like in the book, the story, the young children don't understand why Dad has come home and he's so irritable and different than he was, which can lead to all kinds of problems in the family if there's not an understanding. Knowledge is power.
The doctor that you have represented in the book, she does a great job explaining to the children using visual aid as to the different parts of the brain and what part was injured and how it's going to be fixed.
Doesn't she? Dr. Johnson is what we've called her, and she also uses something called the 7 C's, which which give kids kind of a way of thinking about how to empower themselves to not feel like they're responsible for Dad or Mom's injury, and also for ways to help Dad or Mom to cope and to get beyond the valley they're in because of the injury they sustained.
Are you in Rochester, by the way?
I am. Rochester, New York.
That's a beautiful area. I spent some time do you know where Grand Island is, near Niagara Falls?
Oh, I sure do.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. So that's how I grew up on Long Island, so it's kind of far from Rochester. But my little stint, I did some work in Toronto, and this was 150 years ago. But anyways, so I had to set up camp in Grand Island because I couldn't take my stuff across the border because I had too much. I didn't know there was a way to do it. I didn't want to break the rules. But anyway, so I visited Rochester. It's a beautiful place.
Thank you. It really is pretty. And Larry, I appreciate the fact that you're obviously not the typical New Yorker who you actually knew it was a long ways from New York to Rochester, because most New Yorkers think, upstate is 15 miles out of New York City.
No, I've driven the whole thing. So I love what you're doing. By the way, I went to your website. You're going to be probably have a humble response to this, but you are an amazing guy. I mean, you're helping out a lot of people, the Humane Society, veterans. You just really very busy guy, and I don't know. Did you hit the lottery or something?
I know. You know what? I work really hard, and then I take what I earn and give it to the causes that I believe in. Because Mother Teresa many years ago said something that really struck me. She said that the best exercise of the heart is to reach down and lift other people who are less fortunate up. And that's been a guiding principle in my life. I feel very strongly about it. And, of course, I feel strongly about animals, too. I support law enforcement for the animals. Go ahead, Larry.
Can I interject something? I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but we have, like I said, we have a very. Robin told you, I think I heard her say that we have a very active. We have a great veterans community, and once in a while we'll hear about a dog. What do you call those things? Service dogs.
Yes.
That is actually can help a person with PTSD. Can you talk about that a little bit? And would it help somebody with brain injury?
It's potentially yes. I'm not a real expert on service dogs. I know that there are organizations that actually certify these dogs. Just like they do for the blind. And it's amazing. Anybody who's owned a dog knows how amazing dogs can be, and how loving and supportive they can be. And certainly for people that have significant anxiety problems, a dog can serve to help reduce those problems. And so I'm all for it. I mean, I think animals are. I have a couple of dogs myself. I don't know how I could go through life without them.
There's even a dachshund in this book, and the dachshund is so sad when he's going off to war. Look at that sad.
I know.
Isn't he? By the way, I have to give a shout out to Valerio Mazzoli, who's actually near you. He's in Orlando, Disney Studios. He did all these illustrations.
Wow.
And he put the dachshund in, and you can see his touch. If you look at the back cover of the book, he created Mr. Brain, which is a character of the brain. But he did a great job. And of course, we had a little bit of a back and forth about what kind of dog to use, but we ended up using a dachshund, which I thought was a good choice.
And also, if I could mention this, and I hope it's not stepping over some kind of politically correct line, but the family is multiracial, which I think is a good thing in today's world. It'll make it more relatable to everybody. I think that's an important thing. You're telling one story, and you don't want to alienate anybody, so that's great.
Thank you, and that's really why we did it, because we wanted to make it inclusive and have everybody feel like they could be a part of the story. Because you know what, we're much bigger than this whole race thing. We're one giant family,
right?
And we all, like you said in the intro, our troops make such a sacrifice so that we can have this radio show and we can talk about these things, and we owe them so much.
Absolutely, and thank you for what you're doing. You're you're a role model.
I would say.
All right, I apologize to the listeners. I normally do give this away, a book away at the end of every interview to our listening audience, but in today's case, this book is going to go to Joe, who is one of the owners of WLCA. You all know Joe because he's on the radio with us so much, and he is also, I don't know how many of you know, he's the vice president of Vets Helping Vets.
Yeah.
I think the president is Eugene Poole. Eugene Poole is the president. But Joe is the vice president, and we're going to give this to him, and he's going to bring it to the Veterans Resource Center.
Larry, that's great. I just want to say one other thing. We are doing a free giveaway of the book on Amazon. So if your listeners do want to try to get a free book, they can go on Amazon. There's a giveaway that's going on for the next 5 days.
Oh, really? Okay. But I like what you said before. If we're not veterans, don't take the free one. Go buy one, because that gives them some money so they can give one away to a veteran.
Here.
And let's just hope that this book makes the difference. Red Skeleton at the end of his show would always say, if I made one person laugh, I've done my job. Well, if you just make one family a little bit happier, then you've done your job with this. Dr. Fisher, thank you so much for what you're doing.
Thank you, both of you, for your support and for getting the word out on this book. Thank you.
You're welcome. We will be right back with more AM Ocala Live.
Source. Fox News Radio. I'm Chris Foster. President Trump selling a Republican tax plan this morning in a speech to the National Association of Manufacturers in D.C.